And welcome back, everyone, to a Withdrawal Wednesday, where I answer some of your questions that you submitted to me via my Discord server. If any of you don't even know what I'm talking about, just look in the live show description. There will be a link to my Discord server. Please join it. Navigate to the hashtag YouTube mailbox channel and type in any question in there, and I'll add it to my log, and eventually your question will be made to a video. It's quite awesome. It's something that I love. It makes my job actually easier as a content creator, saves me some time, allows me to better engage with my audience, so on. Yeah, that's what we're going to be doing today for the most part, is looking at some topics that you guys asked me. There will also be some more that we don't get to today that will be made in the following days. Just some ones that I wanted to spend more time on. And then, I didn't tell anyone about this, but I wanted to go live yesterday, and I just couldn't due to certain factors. It was my final day of school. I stayed up very late on Monday night trying to schedule videos out for yesterday and today and get a lot of editing done, and I did. Overall, this week's been a huge success. Scheduling-wise, content creation-wise, we've talked about a lot of different teams, a lot of different programs. However, I am sitting here today, and I wanted to go live yesterday, and I didn't, because I just didn't have the time and was quite tired. I'm still tired today. In fact, there's a part of me that doesn't even want to do this, but at the same time, I love this. I love talking to you guys. I love talking about college football. So, yeah, we're going to do this here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge what I was planning on being yesterday's show with today's show. And we're just going to roll with it. It's going to be a lot of different topics. We're talking about Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Day. It's probably the main topic of today's show, is the expectations for Kalen DeBoer moving forward. And Day's expectations have already been discussed. And after they've won it all, I don't think they need to be discussed again. Maybe sometime next season or during the season, that can be another topic of discussion. I already know there's a lot of people talking about Ohio State and Ryan Day, and even some complaints from the Ohio State fan base about their team and recruiting, which we'll actually get to later in this video. But I want to talk about Ryan Day and why I think he's a player in college football. And by a player, I don't mean like a college football player on the roster. I mean a player of the larger game of the sport. He's very controversial, and that's something I've noticed over the past really years in covering the sport. But after he won it all, I thought it would go away a little bit, and ultimately it hasn't. There's still a lot of controversy surrounding Ryan Day, and I understand some of it. It's so hilarious. I was not correct in my assessment of the 2024 Ohio State team for parts of the year, although by the end of the year, it was, obvious that they were going to win it all, and I was someone who accepted that. There were others who refused to. And then at the beginning of the year, I thought that, hey, this team would at least win the Big Ten, and there were parts of the year where it looked like that was going to be obvious. But it's hilarious how my opinion that Day would eventually win a title and that he is an elite coach, once that was vindicated, or at least around the time it was vindicated, I also began to have some more understanding and empathy for some detractors of his. Not the mean detractors, not the people who think that he's soft or that Day isn't actually that good, because I'm going to espouse some opinions of mine that speak very highly of him. I think he's one of the best in the business right now. But I understood some of the more specific, like, he's an elite coach, but this is something I don't like type criticism. So we're going to talk about him for a few minutes and really the points of view about Ryan Day, and I think it'll be pretty interesting. I also want to talk about Marcus Freeman and compare him a little bit to Brian Kelly. The more I looked into it, it's hard to compare both, but I think Marcus Freeman right now has Notre Dame on a better track than where Brian Kelly was dragging Notre Dame towards, where he was driving them towards. And that's very similar to Day versus Urban. I think Day and Freeman are both doing a better job than their predecessors at achieving the highest goal in college football. I also want to talk about why Josh Pate is very, very wrong on something. that being the current playoff format. It's not good. His opinion of the 14-team playoff is one of the worst opinions of a playoff I can ever remember. It's so bad. It's beyond moronic. It's horrible. I don't even really know where to begin with it. I don't. In fact, maybe that's what I should start off with today. I wasn't planning on starting off with that today, but I can tell you off the top of my head why it won't work, why it frankly sucks, and how he thinks it will protect the sport and it will save the sport. His playoff proposal will be the end of the sport as we know it. And I'm very serious. I'm not even exaggerating when I say that. If you think that college football transforming into the NFL light is the death of the sport, then Pate's playoff bracket will quite literally do that. It will be the death of what we knew as college football, and it'll be kind of an NFL light, especially in the postseason. I mean, college football is supposed to be different from the NFL. They're both football at the end of the day, have very similar rules, but there are supposed to be distinctions, and these distinctions continue to get smaller and smaller and smaller. They do. So, yeah, actually, let's begin with that, and then I'll get to the Michigan State and Aidan Chiles content that you see on your screen. That is what we'll get to after this. So the 5+11 format, I think, is the best for college football. I'm going to tie this in to the harsh criticism of Pate's 14-team CFP model. I typically think, by the way, that Pate is good at his job. I think he covers the sport at a broad level fairly well. There's a lot that I personally look up to him in regards to. I model parts of my show after his graphics and many different things because he is the best of the best. That's why. And I already see an argument in the comment section saying he is right about the 5+11 ending up being mostly the SEC, though, Sam. Well, if the SEC is the best conference, they deserve to get the most teams in. That's what I like about the 5+11. It's meritocratic. If the Big Ten decides that they're going to start forcing all of their members to invest in football with 2 additional teams and more historic blue bloods and schools with bigger endowments than the SEC, they could take advantage of this. And then in the late 2020s, early 2030s, they could pack the most teams in. Like, I don't want to see Iowa State in the playoff every other year because they have to be to fulfill a auto bid requirement. Like, I hate that. I hate it. I mean, Iowa State, if they field a competent team, and by confident I mean competent by playoff standards, so a good, great team, because only grade on up really has any chance of winning it. Do you really think that Iowa State last season, do you really, really think that Iowa State, do you really think that that team last year would have competed with Georgia, that they would have competed with Notre Dame or Texas, or heck, would they have even competed with Clemson? Like, come on, guys. That's not what I'm about here. I'm not about trying to say, oh, all the conferences are equal, because it's a disservice to football. It's not honest. You know, the Big 12 is closer to the WAC and Mountain West. And I am too young to talk about the WAC like I know the WAC, but I have, watched some WAC games. I've studied some of the Boise State teams under Chris Peterson because those were very highly touted teams, even according to power ratings. I've looked and observed just college football as it's changed over time, and the more I'm involved in the sport, the more I'll learn, and the more I do learn, the Big 12 is closer to the Mountain West and the WAC of the old than it is to the SEC or Big 10. It just is. It is more distant from the Big 12 of old, like the 2000s, where you had Nebraska, you had Texas, you had Colorado with some good years, you had Bob Stoops in Oklahoma. It's not that anymore. They should not have two guaranteed teams because more often than not, none of the teams they will field will be able to even reach the semifinals. Occasionally they will get one, but you already have that one auto bid. You do in the 5+11 format. There are still auto bids there. There's just a ton of at-larges. And then for the ACC, honestly, more often than not, I think with Miami and then Clemson being around, because since Dabo hasn't retired already, I don't think he's going to retire until he literally can't coach anymore. If the portal and NIL was going to force him to retire, he would have already done it. I think that Clemson and Miami will be players for the college football playoff and national title. So for the ACC, I guess 2 slots makes sense. But at that point, why restrict him to 2? What if Florida State comes back? What if Georgia Tech under Key, if they keep him and continue to feed him resources? What if, and I know I'm rambling here, I'll get to the topic at hand. What if he can occasionally make the CFP or win 9, 10 games, 8 games a year instead of 6 or 7? Then, with the 14-team format, the ACC only gets 2 teams in when maybe they deserve 3 or even 4. I know the ACC's been super weak, but I love Key. I think Cristobal's going to figure Miami out. I don't think Clemson's going to go anywhere because they did just have a bad recruiting class, but now they're rebounding there. Dabo finally opened up and is using the portal a little bit, and I think that they have larger NIL than some people figure. They just, like Ohio State and like Michigan of the past, they prioritize more the players already on their roster. They pay players to retain them, and then like if there is a Bryce Underwood, or for Ohio State, if there is a Jeremiah Smith, or there's some player that's generational, like yeah, you go out and pay that player, but you prioritize the players who are already proven commodities, proven talent on your roster. I don't like how things are boxed in that 14-team format. I don't. Like, not one bit. I hate it. I hate it. I hate how teams are boxed in. The SEC and Big Ten should not be restricted to 4 because some years they will deserve more than that. The ACC and while the Big 12 probably won't deserve more than 1 or 2 every year, I can't tell you the future. I can't. There was a time where the Big 12 in the 2000s was way stronger than the Big 10. How times have changed in 20 years. There was that time. I mean, do we seriously think most of the Jim Tressel teams would have beaten some of Bob Stoops' best? I don't think so. What about the Joe Pa teams? Or none of them would have stood a chance against Pete Carroll's USC teams. We all saw how that worked. I mean, I didn't even watch those games live, and I can tell you by watching those games in highlights and looking at the talent USC had, you know what the Rose Bowl was in the 2000s? It was the annual getting Shrek'd by USC Bowl, where USC would play Penn State or Illinois or Michigan. It would be USC by the 4th quarter, their backups are in, or they're up by double digits, and you just know it's over. And again, how times have changed. Now USC went from the conference where they were the dominant player in the 2000s to one where now they're not even second fiddle. They're trying to be second fiddle. So boxing things in, even if it's in a short period of time, I don't like, because we're looking for stability. We're looking for something that can go the distance like the BCS did for 15 years. And a lot can change in 15 years. In 15 years from the beginning of the BCS, Nebraska went from the best program or one of the best programs in America to not even top 10 and kind of on their way out and moving conferences. That happened in 15 years. So I don't like it. Now, Juck's playoff proposal, which is, it's already been proposed. It's a 4 + 4 + 2 + 2 + 3. That gives 3 at-large bids. Notre Dame will likely take up 1, but that's at least an additional 2 that can go to, maybe 1 goes to the ACC or the Big Ten or another combination of the Power 4. That at least provides more flexibility. I strongly prefer that over the 14-team model. Strongly. I mean, I hate the 14-team model with passion. So let's get into it. Honestly, I'm fired up about this. It sucks. It absolutely sucks, and you cannot convince me otherwise. The 5+11 college football playoff format is the best for college football. It is. It will safeguard college football's future and prevent it from turning into the NFL light, and I'm going to tell you why. Number one, the number of at-large bids, 11, will allow flexibility and allow changes in the sport to be, they'll allow changes in the sport to impact the postseason. They won't keep the current order. They won't set super strict and not arbitrary rules, but they'll keep. It'll allow flexibility. It'll allow for changes, and I think that, gosh, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing for the sport. I really do. When you look at the number of at-large selections, the auto bids retain the importance of the conference championship game and being the best in your conference. They retain that. They also allow for some Cinderella stories, for maybe a 3-loss or even 4-loss team to win their conference and get in. They allow for some fun comeback stories. So I love the 5+11 format for the college football playoff that's been proposed by the SEC. I love it because it provides flexibility. It emphasizes the importance of conference championship games and winning your conference. That's why the 5 auto bids are there for the Power 4 plus the G5. And it also allows for tons of flexibility within the sport. What if the ACC is better in a few years than it is now? And instead of getting 1 or 2 teams in every year, they deserve more 3 or 4. Well, this format can adjust for that, unlike the 14-team CFP, where there are no at-large selections and they're all auto bids that will be extremely obtuse. That doesn't make sense at all. I know that right now it looks like the SEC and the Big Ten are the only conferences that'll matter in the future, and honestly, I wouldn't push back on that if you said that. I'm kind of that opinion myself. But at the same time, to a certain degree, they deserve that because they're the best in the business right now. They produce the best teams. They acquire the most talent. They do the best job at developing said talent. And the ACC's been kind of a mess. And the Big 12 is trying to still recover from Texas and Oklahoma leaving. And I don't know if they can truly ever recover from that. It was their only 2 blue blood schools, and they just got up and left for the SEC, making the SEC so much stronger. And they were already very strong, and it made the Big 12 so much weaker. But that's why the primary reason I love the 5+11 format is it provides flexibility, and not just in the long term, but in the short term too. With the strength of schedule metrics that the SEC wants to use, and yes, their power ratings, I know the power ratings are biased towards the SEC, but you can compensate for that by using a composite ranking system, whereas FPI currently uses ESPN recruiting rankings, which are more SEC biased. Use a composite recruiting system and then still prioritize game analytics over raw recruiting rankings, and I think you will have a solution there to any potential SEC bias. Adjusting for strength of schedule, moving the SEC to 9 conference games, moving the ACC to 9 conference games means all the power conferences are all playing 9 conference games, and because strength of schedule matters now more than it did before, and even then, it mattered more than people would admit. For example, there's a reason why Alabama at 9-3 was ahead of 10-2 Miami. Why? Strength of schedule and quality wins. Ole Miss and South Carolina were ahead of BYU, were ahead of Iowa State. They were even ahead of Clemson, who won a conference. Why? Well, for South Carolina, it was the head-to-head win, but also because they played tougher schedules. They did, and they played in a tougher conference. So if you make strength of record and strength of schedule matter more than they already do, well, that incentivizes playing non-conference games. Why is that? Well, let's say you're an ACC team or a Big 12 team. You schedule an SEC team because by preseason metrics and by reputation, they're viewed as the toughest conference in America. You get that win over an SEC team as an ACC and Big 12 team, well, guess what? Your reputation is going to skyrocket as long as you hold on and don't lose 3 games in the regular season. It just is. And because there are so many at-large selections, if you have a quality win over an ACC or Big Ten opponent, an SEC Big Ten opponent, or if you're the Big 12, a win over an ACC opponent would be a huge boost to your resume as well because of the weakness of that conference, then you could get in without reaching your conference championship game. Think of BYU last year. BYU was Ole Miss losing to Georgia, or South Carolina losing to Missouri, or South Carolina losing to, I think, Old Dominion at the beginning of the year, where they really struggled in that game, away from reaching a hypothetical 16-team college football playoff. A huge part of the reason why, even though they lost to Kansas, Arizona State, is because they beat SMU on the road to begin the year, and that was a quality win. So already it'll incentivize non-conference scheduling if done correctly. And it also provides flexibility for the long term of college football, rewarding the best teams and not just what we view as the best conferences right now. Because the best conferences, for example, you could have a bunch of teams in that 30 to 20 range, a bunch of them, and because of that, that's the best conference. But you could also have only 3 teams, let's say, inside the top 10 or top 15 in the strongest conference if it's a down year and everyone's being compressed by beating up on each other, and maybe the teams with the most talent are the least experienced and lesser talented teams are more experienced. The SEC this year is like that. Georgia, Texas, Alabama returns 60% of their production, but still they lost a lot. The top teams in the SEC lose quite a bit of talent, and some teams last year that didn't finish ranked, like Texas A&M, for example, they returned 70% of their production. Vanderbilt's close to that. I also look at a team like Auburn, who returns a bunch. Oklahoma returns a bunch, and they weren't even top 25 in final FPI. So I like the flexibility that the 5+11 gives the sport, and it doesn't pigeonhole conferences into only having this maximum amount of teams. That's not what college football is about. The 5+11 is the best because it's meritocratic and incentivizes out-of-conference games. It won't destroy them. Now, some teams won't schedule tough out-of-conference games, but that's always been the reality. Some teams love cream puff schedules. It depends on the head coach, the athletic director. The world's never going to be perfect. But in this format, I can tell you that, like Ohio State and Georgia and Alabama and these bigger schools who are only going to lose at most 3 games per year and potentially at most 2 games per year, so they're almost guarantees in the playoffs, having those tougher out-of-conference games against maybe not really small opponents, because if they lose that game, it makes them look bad and they don't stand much to gain, but scheduling against bigger opponents, well, that can help them. It can give their staff an idea of what they have in their team. And it can also, if they lose, it's a quality loss, which is worse than a win, is better than a win against a cupcake. And if they win, it's a massive win that will be remembered for the whole season. The next part of this video is about why I think the 14-team playoff is a disaster. It is going to ruin the sport if implemented. I don't get it. I do not get why Josh Pate and Joel Klatt think the 14-team CFP with no at-large selections, I don't get it. I don't get why they like that. I mean, Pate has been saying forever, you aren't what your record says you are. And supporting the 14-team playoff flies in the face of that opinion. It does. Because if you are not what your record says you are, and you aren't, then 10-2 BYU is not better than 9-3 South Carolina. They're not better than 9-3 Ole Miss. They're not better than 9-3 Alabama. And yet he is advocating for a system where 10-2 BYU or 10-3 Iowa State will get in over 9-3 South Carolina or 9-3 Ole Miss, even though those teams would be much more competitive in the college football playoff. I just don't get it. Yes, the 5+11, I think, initially will be packed with more SEC teams than teams from any other conference. and that can be annoying. But they're the best conference. We should be rewarding the best of the best, not becoming all tribalistic and saying, well, since they're from a different conference, they can't be better than the teams in my conference. That's not how it works, because the teams in the conference I reside in the conference that my team is a part of, has to always be the best. Like, that's just not logical. What's logical is letting teams decide things on the field. And to a certain degree, power ratings won't let that happen. They almost have preseason floors and ceilings built into a lot of these teams. But at the same time, if a team that doesn't have a lot of star talent is winning games left and right by double digits, by 20, 30, 40 points, like Indiana, for example, they will finish ranked highly. Indiana finished top 10 in FPI. If they beat Ohio State on the road, they would have finished top 5 in FPI. If they beat Notre Dame, again, top 5 in FPI, for example, and they started the year super low, and they had almost no blue chip talent. So if you perform well and you punch above your weight class, and you are dominant, and you build a monster through development, the power ratings will recognize that. They will, because towards the end of the year, when the playoff rankings are unveiled and when ultimately Selection Sunday occurs and the playoff bracket's settled, at that point, recruiting rankings are not the largest factor anymore. They are how teams perform against their schedule. That's it. That's what it is. So I don't get the whole argument from Klatt or Pate talking about why the 5+11 model is bad. It's not. It's the only thing. It's the only way you could expand the playoffs and keep college football from looking like the NFL, if done correctly. I still don't like the play-in games. I already made a live show about that, how I think the 16-team CFP with the top 2 teams getting a bye and 2 play-in games a week before the first round for 15 versus 14 and 13 versus 16 seed. I've already talked about how I think that's dumb. I think you should just do a 16-team playoff with no bye. That's, the traditional normal way of doing a 16-team playoff, the intuitive way. I don't know if that'll happen, though. But even that model, as I think obtuse as the idea of a first 4 in college football is, would be much better than the 14-team model. There'd be no flexibility. No matter what, the SEC and Big Ten would get 4 teams in, no matter what. Even if the SEC or Big Ten has a super down year and they don't field the best teams, the best, top 10 teams, for example. They likely will, but you always got to factor in that what if. And then the ACC and Big 12 are pigeonholed at 2. Number one, the Big 12 probably won't field 2 teams a year that can actually contend for winning a playoff or even a playoff game. And the ACC will probably field around 2. Some years 1, but some years they could even field 3, depending on how Florida State does in the future and what Georgia Tech does holding on to Brent Key, and maybe what Syracuse does with Fran Brown. I'm just saying, the 14-team CFP is not as flexible, and because all that matters in that playoff, all that matters is your record in conference games, it's going to kill out a conference. And do not buy what Pate's argument is that, we'll just have each conference form their own committee. When did adding more bureaucracy in college football do anything? Just look at the 4-team college football playoff and how that all unraveled. It's asinine. It's, in truth, it's moronic. Acting like more committees will do the sport any good. They won't. You need one committee. You need order. You do not need chaos. That many committees with that much diversity of thought across that many conferences with their own agendas would be disastrous. There'd be different standards enforced across the board. So whatever he says about how his model will work given certain parameters, those parameters are beyond unrealistic. They are. It's more realistic for the conferences to agree on a proper strength of schedule metric, and I don't even know if they will agree on that. But the idea that an enforcement body in college football, or that all 4 conferences will agree to have their own committees to determine which teams get in the 4 plus 4 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1 model, the 14-team model that's being proposed by the Big Ten, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. And the ACC and the Big 12 will fight for the opportunity to have more than just 2 teams per year. The Big 10, if they have any stones and if they look at just the television revenue, the endowments of their schools, the fact they have 18 schools more than any other conference does, and they have very wealthy alumni and donor bases, will say, oh yeah, some years if we play our cards right, we could get 6 or 7 teams in. And then the SEC, right now, they're thinking the same thing, because in metrics, they are the best conference. So more often than not, they would be getting more than 3 or 4 teams in the college football playoff. The 16-team model really benefits everyone except for the Big 12, and even then, it's what's best for the sport. So if what's best for the sport happens to hurt one conference and it's the weaker conference, I'm sorry, but that's how it works. And the Big 12 can compensate for that by scheduling out-of-conference games against the Big 10 or SEC and then beating some of those teams, which they are capable of doing, especially, I would say, at the beginning of the year before teams are worn down by depth and playing time and the schedule they face. So that's my piece on the 5+11 model. And man, I've been talking about this already for like 30 minutes. I think it was a well-deserved rant, though. Maybe people won't like it. But yeah, I want to move on and talk about Michigan State and whether or not this is a make-or-break season for quarterback Aidan Chiles. This question was brought to me by Drew Allerseason. Is it a make-or-break year for Aidan Chiles? Drew Allerseason, a viewer of the channel and a member of my Discord server. It's free. You can ask me questions that I'll make videos out of in the YouTube mailbox channel. Link to the Discord servers down below. He asked me a question about whether or not it's a make or break season for quarterback Aidan Chiles of the Michigan State Spartans. Chiles threw for 2,415 yards last year, 13 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, a 59.4 completion percentage, a 128.7 passer rating, and he had a 60.8 quarterback efficiency rating. I think it is a make-or-break year for Aidan Chiles, and honestly, I think it's a make-or-break year for the Michigan State football program. And before I get to that, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, like the video, and comment your prediction for Michigan State and Aidan Chiles, his stat line, for example, your prediction for that, down in the comment section below. It's a make-or-break season because of how 2024 ended. 2024 did not end off on a good note. Blowout loss to Rutgers, near choke job to Purdue, blowout loss to Illinois, went up 10-0 on Indiana, only for Indiana to score 47 unanswered points. The Michigan game and how that went down was not very encouraging, and really their only impressive win of the year was over Iowa, where they won 32-20. That was their only impressive win of the year. So many bad losses to teams who traditionally have been under Michigan State for almost the entirety of the Big Ten since 2014. You know, when Rutgers and Maryland joined, and when the Big Ten created the East and West divisions, which are still imprinted in many people's minds. You can't lose to that Rutgers team by 20 or 30 points. You can't do that. You can't only beat Purdue by 7, and you can't lose to Illinois by 20 points. You just can't do it. You can't have the game against Michigan where early on you have all the momentum and you're running the ball down their throat, and then you have a turnover, and that turnover completely wipes away all progress in the game and puts you behind the 8 ball. You cannot do that. You can't. And that matters. It does, especially with the Michigan rivalry, the fact that Indiana and Michigan State had a rivalry that's been one-sided in MSU's favor, And the fact that Michigan State got destroyed by Indiana, even though Indiana was a top 10 team last year, people still see the Hoosier logo and they think, team isn't all that talented. How in the heck did we lose to them? And as for Rutgers, Rutgers is better than they've traditionally been, but they're still not a top 25 team. And for them to come into East Lansing in the snow and just out-physical Michigan State and pound them to a pulp, that was bad. That was humiliating. Every other loss under Jonathan Smith last year I kind of brushed away. But that Rutgers loss was bad. That was one that I watched and I thought to myself, I don't think Spartan fans are getting over that. Not until they win games. That has set faith in him behind the 8-ball. I think similarly with leaving Michigan State after showing flashes as a true freshman in 2023, and then transferring to Arizona State in 2024 where he balls out and is a top 10 QB, while Chiles is not even top 40 and has nearly a 1-to-1 TD-INT ratio. That probably didn't sit well with some people either, although we did not know Leavitt would be a top 10 QB. We didn't. And how he played against Texas was absolutely phenomenal, and I think he's going to be one of the best QBs in America in 2025. But I also think Aidan Chiles will be. Chiles was in year one of being a full-time starter with a team that had little to no depth at a variety of positions. And while Jonathan Smith and his staff brought in a lot of transfers, most of the roster was still constructed by Mel Tucker. And Mel Tucker didn't do any development. He didn't do any coaching. As Mike Valeni has said before, he's one of the biggest, if not the biggest grifter in college football history. The fact that he nearly got $95 million for the coach he ended up being is just, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. Smith took over a worse situation than Tucker did, and D'Antonio did not leave the Michigan State program in a great place. So all that being said, that's why I give Michigan State a lot of grace, even with their disappointments last season. I think Chiles is going to throw for well over 20 touchdowns. He might break Michigan State's passing touchdown record. And I think that having Nick Marsh and Omari Kelly and the other transfer wide receivers they've added is going to help a lot there. Same with returning Jack Velling and building up the offensive line. They return some pieces on the offensive line, and they also bring in Connor Moore, Matt Golbin, and they have a whole recruiting class that Smith has built coming in. So they're weeding out some of the Tucker players and bringing in transfers and high schoolers that they've scouted and they will have a chance to exclusively develop. I think Chiles will be in a much better situation than last season, and that combined with an easier schedule for Michigan State makes me believe, yes, this is a make or break year for him. Because with this schedule, with the staff retention and continuity that Michigan State has, with the roster retention moves they made and with the upgrades they made in the portal, if Michigan State and Aidan Chiles aren't going to be good, if they aren't going to go over their win total, and for Chiles, if he isn't going to make improvements and have a QBR that's in the top 25 or top 30 instead of outside the top 50, and a passer rating that is in the 140s, then when will he? When will he? And with the change in athletic director, Jonathan Smith's buyout is lower, and with Jay Batt's fundraising abilities, if Smith implodes and they're 4-8 again, he may just want to pull the plug and try something new and bring in his guy, whether that's Brent Key, whether that's someone from the ECC Big 12, or maybe an assistant from the SEC or Big 10, or maybe, given MSU's money and fundraising ability, their potential as a program, maybe they hire a bigger name, someone we didn't expect. But I do think, to answer your question, Drew Aller season, this is a make or break year for Aidan Chiles, absolutely. You should expect him to throw for more than 3,000 yards. You should expect him to have at least a 2-to-1 TD-INT ratio or better, preferably 3-to-1. You should expect him to be in the mid-60s, lower 60s in completion percentage, and his passer rating should be in the 140s at least, and his QBR should be higher than a 60.8. Chiles showed similar amounts of talent last year to Dylan Raiola, except he has legs, and Raiola was a 5-star out of high school. Chiles, I believe, was a top 100 player in his recruiting class. So he should play better than he did last year, and he did get better at times down the stretch. So It's a make or break year absolutely for Aidan Chiles in Michigan State. Thank you for that question. By the way, guys, just for a quick announcement here. I will be answering questions like I always do on a Withdrawal Wednesday, whether it is in between topics or after all my topics are done. But I highly advise you to send in a super chat to guarantee that your question gets answered. Highly, highly advise it. Just wanted to shoot that out there. Okay, let's move on. I want to talk about Florida. I want to talk about DJ Lagway and whether DJ Lagway can carry Florida to the college football playoff. Can DJ Lagway carry Florida, carry Billy Napier and the Gators to a college football playoff appearance? It's something that, it's actually a question that I asked myself. This is not a viewer question. This is something that I straight up asked myself. DJ Lagway is viewed as almost a unanimous top 5 quarterback in college football entering 2025. DJ Lagway is viewed as one of the best in the SEC, one of the best in college football, and Florida returns a lot of seniors. So can Lagway carry the Florida Gators, carry Florida football to the college football playoffs? I think actually the answer is yes. Yes, he can. And the reasoning for that is he has an experienced team, one of the more experienced teams in college football, and the schedule aligns for them better than it did last year. And the third point, which we'll get to at the end, is that DJ Lagway is so talented to where if he is a top 5 QB or the best QB in the country or second best or third best, if he's in that top 5, he may carry Florida to some wins that they shouldn't earn, or wins against teams that are clearly better than them, especially since they host Texas, for example. They host Tennessee. Georgia is in a familiar neutral field site in Jacksonville. You look at Florida's roster. Wide receiver X, senior. Wide receiver Z, senior. Left tackle, senior. Center, senior. Guard, right guard, senior. DJ Lagway, sophomore. Jaden Baugh, sophomore. But his backup, Jacoby Jackson, senior. And same thing with the backup right guard, Cameron Waits, senior. And Devin Manuel, the backup right tackle, senior. The two deep is full of older guys. And some of the younger guys, like Eugene Wilson III, DJ Lagway, and Jaden Baugh, are fairly talented. Look on the defense. It's littered with seniors and juniors. D-end, Tyreek Sapp, redshirt senior. Jamari Lyons, nose tackle, redshirt junior. Caleb Banks, D-tackle, redshirt senior. George Gums Jr. at Jack, senior. Miles Graham at linebacker, sophomore. Grayson Howard, junior. Corner, Devin Moore, senior. Another corner, right corner, Dijon Johnson, junior. And the nickel and the two safeties, Jordan Castell, Bryce Thornton, and Sharif Denson, juniors. Now, the two deep on defense is younger than the two deep on offense. It is. And I would expect that given that Florida's offensive line is the strength of their team. I would straight up expect that for the offense to be deeper and better built than the defense. But Florida, with roster seniority, and roster seniority is rare. Now, this is not 2023, 2024, or 2022, or 2021, where you have COVID sixth years. That's not what this is. The sixth year senior is almost entirely a thing of the past with rare exception, and after this year, it certainly will be gone with rare exceptions, like a medical redshirt, for example. I look at Florida, and I think to myself that with an older roster that can limit mistakes, that can do some coaching of their own, that can be coaches because they're older, and they have highly talented players like Jaden Baugh, DJ Lagway. I think center Jake Slaughter is the best center in college football. You then look at their schedule and you think to yourself, well, in weeks 1 and 2, they get 2 easy games. There's no kicking off against Miami like last year. You have LIU and USF in weeks 1 and 2. Then you go on the road to LSU and on the road to Miami back-to-back in weeks 3 and 4. Those are not guaranteed losses. Miami loses more than Florida, and I think LSU is relying a lot more on the portal than they should, And Florida has actually done a better job of retaining and upgrading their roster than LSU has, especially when it comes to the long term. Relying on that many transfers if you're LSU is dangerous. There is a world where Florida is 4-0 entering the bye week in week 5. More likely than not, it's 3-1. I think they'll drop one of the road games to LSU or Miami. But then anywhere from 3-1 to 4-0 and maybe 2-2. But they'll be a strong team regardless. They enter that week 6 matchup against Texas at home. Let's say they're 3-1 or 4-0. And let's say that Arch Manning has somewhat of a bad day, that Texas's O-line on the road in the swamp in a night game just gets off the wrong foot, tons of false starts. It's just not a good day for a Texas team that does lose a lot, especially on offense. And say that DJ Lagway, hypothetically speaking, is the number 1 QB, which is possible. And because he's the number 1 QB, no matter how good Texas's defense is, he is going to make some plays. And Florida beats Texas in week 6. You're looking at a 5-0 or a 4-1 team that just beat a unanimous preseason top 5 team. At that point, a road game against Texas A&M isn't impossible to win. Mississippi State in week 8 will probably be a cakewalk, and then off the bye from week 9, in week 10, a neutral field game against Georgia, that won't be an impossible win. Florida was beating Georgia last year when DJ Lagway was healthy before he got hurt. And then road game against Kentucky in week 11, another road game against Ole Miss in week 12. That'll be hard, but they're both winnable games. And then against Tennessee in week 13, Tennessee has a hard time beating Florida, especially in the swamp. And then Florida State in week 14, I think after Florida and Florida State play their respective schedules, that might be a cakewalk game, especially since it's at home for the Gators. Florida is a team that could go 6-6 or 7-5. They're also a team that could go 10-2. And a 10-2 Florida team would, just absolutely reach the college football playoff. It wouldn't even be a conversation. And with that schedule, they would get a home game. Imagine a playoff game in the swamp. Just if you're a Florida fan, imagine that. Just close your eyes, take a deep breath, and imagine that. A playoff game in the swamp. It'd be a thing of beauty. So yes, I do think DJ Lagway can carry Florida to the college football playoffs. And heck, he'll probably do some carrying because I don't think their roster is one of the best in the country. But he's one of the best in the country at QB, and Florida's roster is still good. It's a top 15 talent roster. When you adjust for development and game day coaching, it's around that or maybe a little bit lower, but still definitely top 25, top 20. And that with a superstar QB can get you places. That can get you to the college football playoff. That can get you a win over Georgia or Texas, especially since those games are not on the road. That can get you a win over Miami on the road or LSU on the road, for example. So I'm not sitting here telling you Florida will make the playoffs. I'm not actually predicting that to happen, but it is possible. And it's something you should pay attention to. It's something that you should settle in your mind that it's a possibility that Florida can reach the college football playoffs, especially because of DJ Lagway. Alrighty. Now we can talk about Kalen DeBoer. Before that, I have to get some water. My head's killing me. So I will go get some water, and I will be right back, guys. Alrighty. Thank you for your patience. I really appreciate it. Make sure to like the video. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to hit the notification bell. If you have any questions for me that you want me to answer live in between the segments, send in a super chat. I really appreciate it. Okay, my head's killing me, but we're going to power through this because we won't be live again until Sunday, and I love talking about this. I love you guys. I appreciate all my viewers, whether we're at 50 concurrent viewers or a few hundred or a few thousand as we've had before, or even just 10 or 5. I appreciate you guys. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life if given the opportunity, is talk about the greatest sport and influence it in a positive way. And speaking of a positive influence, I want to talk about something that I think needs to be addressed, and that is the long-term expectations for Kalen DeBoer. That's what I want to talk about now. What are the long-term expectations for Kalen DeBoer? And I ask that because Alabama went 9-4 last year. The Crimson Tide had their worst season in terms of win-loss record since Saban's first year in 2007, where they went 7-6. Alabama went 9-4, 5-3 in SEC play. They lost to Vanderbilt, Tennessee, and Oklahoma, neither of whom had a consistent offense, neither of whom had a college football playoff offense. Oklahoma and Tennessee just had a college football playoff defense, and Vanderbilt caught Alabama napping. So I want to talk about this. You all know how the story is. Oh, it's unacceptable. They better make the playoffs this year. I don't want to quite do that with Alabama. I don't. I want to talk about the long-term expectations and less about this year. Because yes, 2025 and what they do in 2025 matters. But I also think that Saban left the roster in a worse shape than the recruiting rankings would suggest. So you have to give Kalen DeBoer, who's a different style of coach than Nick Saban, who's a younger coach from a different generation, and who's never coached in the SEC before. He's coached in the North. He's coached in lower divisions and either schools out west or schools in the North. Like Eastern Michigan and Indiana is where he became known as an OC, and then he was a coach at Fresno State, their head coach, and the head coach at Washington. It's not SEC country. So there has to be some empathy. And by empathy, I mean understanding. I don't mean sympathy. A lot of people confuse empathy and sympathy. And empathy is just understanding where someone else is coming from and understanding them. You can have empathy for your greatest enemy, and it will actually help you beat your greatest enemy by understanding them and why they will move certain chess pieces and make certain decisions the way that they do. Before I get any further, I will encourage you to subscribe, like the video, especially if you're an Alabama fan. I'd love to have more Alabama subscribers and be more connected to Alabama football. So subscribe, hit the bell, and comment what you think the long-term expectations should be for Kalen DeBoer. How much do you expect him to live up to the standard that Nick Saban set? Do you think he'll win multiple titles, or one, or none? How many titles should he win, if any? What do you think the acceptable floor on a yearly basis is? I'm curious. I love interacting with my commenters, so please tell me in the comment section. But when I look at Alabama, I see a program that was a little bit shocked by who they were and had a little bit of an identity crisis last year. That's why the discipline was all over the place. That's why players in the 2025 preseason, right after 2024 ended, were saying, oh, we're going to show up for time on workouts and take things seriously. Like, I don't think I want to hear that was an issue during the season or in the 2024 preseason. That's not something that I want to know, and that's something that Saban wouldn't have put up with. But to be fair to DeBoer, Saban's teams at the end did not do a great job at developing wide receiver talent like they had before. They did not do like Billy Napier or Curt Cignetti recruited and developed better with Alabama at wide receiver than Alabama's recent staff did under Saban. They did a better job, I think, at handling running back, at developing quarterback. I mean, Bryce Young was one of the best Alabama quarterbacks under Saban, and yet he didn't win a title. Why? Because his supporting cast wasn't as phenomenal as previous Alabama supporting casts, and I don't think they did the greatest job of developing him. Straight up. Look at the defenses under Pete Golding. They were nowhere near the Kirby Smart defenses or the Jeremy Pruitt defenses. They never were, even if hypothetically they had similar amounts of talent. I think the assistant coaching fell off. I think the coordinators, they fell off. And I think Saban got older. And I think Saban even fell off a little bit too. And therefore, despite Alabama, because of Saban's reputation, because the fact they had apex recruiters and Saban would demand that, and several elite players wanted to play for him, and Alabama's a blue blood, they have good pipelines, they're in a talent-rich state and area and conference, they fell off. They were not as talented as prior Alabama teams, and then sticking them in an expanded SEC with Oklahoma and Texas joining, who are blue bloods, who are historically closer to Alabama than they are to even Texas A&M or LSU, that is going to make things tougher. It just is. And I think that while Kalen DeBoer should have high expectations placed upon him, and I think that last year, yes, cannot be the norm. Josh Pate said this on Crane and Company the other day. How do we know Saban wouldn't have had some 9-3 seasons in this new era? Well, you don't, because he left. He left after 2023. And I don't blame him either when players are constantly asking him for raises and new NIL deals. And then when Michigan came out as flat and had such a bad game as they did in the Rose Bowl, and Alabama came out on fire and Michigan still beats you. Michigan played one of their worst games in 2023 that I watched, and I watched that team closely. Alabama was playing one of their best games, and I watched them a whole lot. I actually admittedly watched them kind of annoyed for much of the year because I'm thinking to myself, you have a top 3 talent roster, and you cannot pull away from a team to save your life, and you needed basically a Hail Mary to beat Auburn. But they did it. They were clutch. They won close games, and Saban kept them together and improved them throughout the year. To make all that progress, to have a top 3 talent roster, and then to go out against a Michigan team who started off flat, who only had a top 15 talent roster, and then play one of your better games and just lose to them and have your QB get sacked 5+ times, that's not encouraging. And more importantly than that, because I think Saban had a lot of things, from my perspective at least then, set up for him to come back and make a run in 2024, there's behind-the-scenes issues that none of us know about, and it turns out that players, well, they want NIL raises. They want to be guaranteed basically a better salary the following year. And that right there, for a coach like Saban, where Saban's all about developing people into better people, not just better players, but better people. And Saban's about loyalty and sticking it out and grinding through and being only paid for, or being... Can you guys hear that? Can you guys hear that? I paused because the siren, the severe thunderstorm siren just went off. So I am going to look. I don't think you guys can hear it. I don't think my mic is picking it up. But yes, there is a... Yep. There is a severe thunderstorm warning. If there's a tornado warning, it would have displayed on my phone. Just making sure I'm safe. I don't want to be live and then a tornado just decks me and I die live on air. That would be a pretty humiliating death. Okay. Thank you very much. I'll just continue. I'll have my phone on, and it'll flash if there is a tornado warning, or I might hear one of my family members' phones downstairs, because those phone tornado warnings are pretty loud. But I'll edit this out when I release this episode on Spotify, and I'll edit it out when I release the Alabama episode as well. The point being, and I actually forget where I was, but I don't think that matters all that much. The SEC is tougher with Oklahoma and Texas. That's the point. And at the end of the day, You don't know. You do not know if Nick Saban wouldn't have had a 9-3 year this year. You don't know that. He could have. Alabama's roster did not look good by the end of the year. Do you remember the second time they played Michigan in 2024, where Michigan's backups made Alabama look like Texas when they played Georgia the first time, where they were completely starstruck, deer in headlights? How are these guys physically impaling us every play? That was bad. That was an indictment, in my view, of a lot of things Alabama when it comes to coaching, when it comes to development, maybe even when it comes to strength and conditioning. Maybe I'm going too far on that, but I don't think DeBoer inherited the best situation. So I think that, combined more importantly with the fact that the SEC is tougher with Oklahoma and Texas, means 9-3 has to be accepted as a type of floor some years. It shouldn't be the most common result, far from it. But an occasional 9-3 year here is not the end of the world. And if you hear the tornado siren in the background, my apologies. I can't control that while I'm live. Anyway, for example, Alabama in 2010, they brought back Mark Ingram, they brought back Greg McElroy from their 2009 national title team. They went 9-3 regular season, won their 10th game in the bowl game against a Michigan State team who had nowhere near the talent they did. So Saban went 9-3 in 2010, and now the SEC is tougher, and you don't have the same talent advantage you did because Saban, one of the greatest recruiters and developers and coaches of all time, isn't there, and Alabama does not have the largest NIL fund, so the game isn't as favorable towards them as it used to be. You have to give some grace and a little bit more leeway and flexibility to this new regime under DeBoer. But I will also say that Kalen DeBoer, I think, needs to win the SEC and a national championship. He can't just continue to miss Atlanta. He can't, and I know it's only year one, but just saying, what if this continues? What if the disappointment of last season continues into 2025 and beyond? He can't do that over and over again. He can't miss Atlanta for several years. He can't not win a title at Bama while he's there. He has to win one in his tenure, in my mind, because Alabama's a blue blood with resources and talent, and I don't think it's unrealistic. Now, at the same time, there's that whole dilemma where Ohio State fans had with Ryan Day, for example, where they wanted him fired after the Michigan game, and I said, look, I get it, because that loss to Michigan was a disaster, and at that point it looked like Day may have had his most disappointing year in year 6 with Ohio State, which would have been a sign that the program was going down. Now, they ended up winning it all, which doesn't, it erases most of your sins, if not all of them, but it also doesn't erase some of the issues that they had, though they're fixing that with their coaching staff, and I think Day's one of the best in the business. Regardless of that, though, let's say Ohio State beat Tennessee but then lost to Oregon a second time. You're not firing Ryan Day. That would be insane. He wins 11 games every year and is constantly in the national title race, the Big Ten championship race, and he wins the games he should win on top of beating some good teams. Loses to some good teams as well, but who doesn't? Even Nick Saban lost to some good teams. Kirby Smart does. Dabo Swinney does. So this is not me saying if he doesn't win a title in X amount of time, he should be fired, or even if he doesn't win the SEC in X amount of time, he should be fired. But Alabama should still hold the standard of this is a national championship contender, this is an SEC contender, and we want to reach the college football playoff 90% of the time. If not 100% of the time, but if one year you miss it here and there, as long as you make it and try to improve and make changes, then it's not that big of a deal at the end of the day, and you'll rebound and you'll get better and you'll live up to the Alabama standard. So that is my view on Kalen DeBoer. And I think, yes, he needs to win the SEC, a national championship. And ultimately, I'm still optimistic about his tenure at Alabama. I really am. I think that he's going to succeed. I do think, especially since he's a younger coach and a guy who I think can be at Alabama for a while, if he's able to survive, if he's able to improve off of last year's failures, I do think that, yes, he will eventually win a title. He'll be there for a while. He'll win the SEC at some point. I think he'll figure out some things that he left Washington with and maybe brought to Alabama, and it just didn't translate. The guy's smart. He's a schematic genius. What he did to Kirby Smart last year, Sark the year prior, what he did at Washington, what he did with Michael Penix at Indiana, I think shows that he's high IQ, football-wise and just in general, very intelligent. I think he's a good leader, good coach. I have him as a top 5 coach right now. So Alabama, you have a great coach. Do not run him off. Let him integrate his system, and if it doesn't work then I'll be wrong and you should get someone new. But he does need some time to get Alabama back to being a team that can be one of the best in the country. Because at the end of Saban's tenure, his teams were not that. 2021 Alabama, one wide receiver gets hurt, and they are no longer close to the best team in America. It doesn't happen to the best teams. Ohio State had their best wide receiver, their 2 best injured in 2022, and nearly beat 15-0 Georgia. Like, Ryan Day and Ohio State ever since 2021 have been a much better program than Alabama has, in my mind. Georgia has been. Michigan, I would say, even has been. And that's including their down year last year. So Bama fell off a little bit toward the end of Saban, and then he left because he knew he couldn't do it the way he wanted to anymore, and he didn't want to lose his edge. DeBoer comes in and has the expectations of Saban, while at the same time Saban at the end of his tenure wasn't fulfilling his own expectations. Again, that's why he retired, because he couldn't fulfill them anymore. So maybe this year they can be a title contender with all they bring back, and they certainly should make the playoffs this year. Doesn't mean I'm picking them to. I know a lot of people aren't, and I understand why, but I think eventually DeBoer will figure it out with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Yeah, I don't think people can hear the tornado siren, but just for context, guys, it's funny that more of you are pouring in as the tornado siren almost seemingly gets louder. I find it hilarious. Yeah, I'm just gonna check the radar. The siren's gonna keep turning on and off until probably, 10 p.m. I think that's when the severe thunderstorm warning ends. I think it's stupid that the siren is now included for a severe thunderstorm. You should reserve that for a tornado, because guess what it does? It's the boy who cried wolf. Oh, it's just the severe thunderstorm alarm. And then you have this big, wide EF5 that, like, destroys your entire town and kills people. It's stupid. Oh, yeah, right now we're, at least not where, but I am in the red, and there's some pink around me. So I'm in the thick of it, and it looks like I will be for at least probably until the end of the stream. So, yeah. Okay. Now I want to talk about, this is going to be fun. I want to talk about Wisconsin, and this is a question from LSUVSFAR. Excellent person to talk to in my Discord server. Love engaging with him. He has a question about Wisconsin. He is someone who I think is very fascinated. It's the same thing with Corn Crazed, wonderful Nebraska channel. You should look him up and subscribe. They like comparing Luke Fickell and Matt Rule because they were hired at the same time. They were both graded fairly well. And Wisconsin and Nebraska, while historically Nebraska's far better, when you factor in their time in the Big Ten since Nebraska joined, I'd say averaging their past in exclusively the Big Ten since the 2000s and averaging their histories mean their programs are pretty similar. So it's kind of a nice comparison with a lot of similar variables. And look, Fickell has just not been the coaching hire and has not produced the results that people thought he would have, that even I thought he would have. I thought they were winning the West the first year he got there. And then that probably wasn't smart because Chris didn't leave as much in the cupboard as a lot of people would have liked to admit. But then last year at the end of the year was disappointing. I thought they fought admirably and were a good team for 10 of their 12 games. But then after they fired the OC, it felt like the team quit against Nebraska and also quit against Minnesota. And 7-5 with last year's schedule would have been awesome. That would have been a massive sign of progress. But instead they went 5-7, and now people are talking about Fickell being fired. I don't think he'll be fired after this coming year. And I think with this schedule, if he goes 6-6, they'll retain him, and if he goes 7-5, they'll give him they'll say, hey, you did a pretty good coaching job. I think a lot of people will think that. However, I do want to answer this question from LSUVSFAR and then get on to bigger and better things. Also, for a personal note, I just realized with this rainstorm, I'm not going to be able to walk with my dad. Unfortunate. I love my walks. I love the walks that my dad and I take. Even when I eventually move out, and I will, if I live in any close proximity with him, I'd like to take walks here and there. It's a great thing. You only have so much time with the people you love. But this question was asked by LSUVS Far. If Fickell gets fired, who can save Wisconsin football? Which coach would you hire to save Wisconsin, to bring them back to prominence if Luke Fickell doesn't work out? I'm not saying he will, but since it's a conversation, I want to bring this one up. And this is a viewer question asked by LSUVS Far. Nebraska fan, love to engage with him, and you can engage with me too if you click the link in the description and join the Discord server, which is totally free, doesn't sign you up for anything. And you, like LSUVS Far, can ask me a question in the hashtag YouTube mailbox channel, totally free. I'll make a video on it, like I am out of this question. And also make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, comment your thoughts down below, and again, give the video a like. It'll help us get into the algorithm. And if you hear a tornado siren in the background, my apologies, but it's also urging you, on top of taking shelter, it is urging you to do all those things I just asked you to do, which are totally free. So let's get into this. And I want to give you some names that I wrote down before I went live. About 10 minutes before I went live, I wrote down some of these names off the top of my head. And there's probably more. And I think in a month I'll circle back to this and make a longer video on it. But some coaches that I think would fit Wisconsin well: Chris Kleiman, Matt Campbell, Kenny Dillingham, Brett Bielema round 2. Think of Rich Rod round 2, Scott Frost round 2, and Barry Odom. Only if Odom succeeds at Purdue. If Odom succeeds at Purdue, whether that's this year and they somehow go bowling, or over 2 years he has a good amount of success, if you can win at Purdue, you can win at Wisconsin. Guys, like, come on. And there's probably some others. Off the top of my head, I think if Jonathan Smith doesn't work out at Michigan State, that would be a good hire. I think Brent Key would be good. I know Key is Georgia Tech alumni, and that's his school, and he's more of a Southern guy. But his identity of run the ball, as he said famously in that Southern Georgia accent after that upset against Florida State, that fits Wisconsin's identity, but it's modernized with Buster Faulkner and the offense that he runs. And I think like Fran Brown. Fran Brown's from the South, former Georgia assistant, but he's having success at Syracuse. I think he's building a good culture, and I think that they're going to find a way to win 6 or 7 games even with that tough schedule. I think I would love Fran Brown at Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a good, proud program. They are. They're a top 25 program nationally. They are one of the better jobs in the Big Ten. Not one of the best, but one of the better jobs. That's why they got Luke Fickell, someone who could have went to jobs that were better than Wisconsin if he waited, or if he wanted to leave Cincinnati at the time. So those are some names I wanted to shoot out. I think the best fits out of all of those, the most realistic, I think Chris Kleiman would be good. Wisconsin has far more resources than Kansas State. Kleiman has shown before with his record against Oklahoma that he knows how to punch above his weight class. He's competed with Texas before when Sarkisian was there in 2022 and 2023. Matt Campbell does more with less. And while if you hire Matt Campbell as Wisconsin, I don't think you'd win the Big Ten. You may not be able to win the Big Ten anyway, unless you can land a really high-end, top-end coach that people just don't know about and you really invest in football. A lot of things would have to go right, in my mind, for Wisconsin to win the Big Ten. It would be easier for Wisconsin in the future to reach the playoff, I think, 2 or 3 times than for it to win the Big Ten once. It would be easier to do that. Brett Bielema round 2, I think that typically a second go-around at a school doesn't work. But then again, he got Illinois to win 10 games and then 8 games 2 years before last season. And this year they're being talked about as a college football playoff contender. I mean, come on. He's a good cultural guy, knows how to put together a good staff. I think does more with less, especially at the QB position. loves physical football. There's a reason he succeeded at Wisconsin before. I love Kleiman, though. Love Kleiman. And then Kenny Dillingham, that was another name I brought up. Arizona State has a lot of potential. They have some resource potential that may even surpass Wisconsin's potential resources. But playing in the Big Ten is more challenging. It's a tougher conference, and you're going to get more resources as a Big Ten school than a Big 12 school. So there's also a chance that everything I said about Arizona State possibly having better resources is the inverse of reality, and it's Wisconsin that has more resources. Dillingham's young. Dillingham would modernize Wisconsin's approach, but I think do it in the right way, and he would definitely bring over some players if Fickell were to be fired after this year, or even after 2026. He'd have some players to bring over in 2026 or 2027 if, again, hypothetically, Fickell doesn't work and they want to hire a new coach. For Brent Key, I'd love that hire. I think Key and Dillingham, along with Kleiman, would be the best hires. Whittingham, if he were 10 years younger, would be the ultimate hire, but he doesn't want to leave Utah anyway, and he's too old. Matt Campbell, I mean, if you can get him, you can get him. He's finally figured out a little bit of Iowa State's Iowa problem in it. Wisconsin, he'd have so much more talent than he does at Iowa State. It would be easier for him to win 8-9 games every year and never have the 4 and 5 win, 6 win seasons he's had at Iowa State before when he has to rebuild. So those are just some names. Answering a question from LSU vs Far. Again, I appreciate you for asking that question. Fickell is 13-13, 8-10 in the Big Ten in 2 seasons at Wisconsin, and I would say he's certainly under pressure. I don't know if hot seat is appropriate, but I think he's under pressure. That is absolutely the case for sure. If he succeeds, and there's a part of me that still thinks he will. In fact, I'm leaning towards he will at least keep his job for a few more years than he'll be fired after this year or the year after that. But there is a chance this just doesn't work and it falls through and Fickell just wasn't a fit at Wisconsin. I think there are a lot of great names that could be Wisconsin's next head coach. All right. Talking about Marcus Freeman and how he is doing a better job than Brian Kelly. And then we have some more topics after that. We have Ohio State recruiting. We have Nebraska's quarterback room. I mean, we have Ryan Day. We have a lot of things to talk about left over, but make sure if you haven't already to subscribe, hit the bell, and send in a super chat if you want me to answer any questions for you. Didn't Luke just get a long contract extension? No, it was a 1 year. It was a 1 year extension. 1 year extension is what it is. That's what it was. And Wisconsin typically does that for their coaches. They just do a 1 year extension every year to just keep things on pace, make sure they don't have to negotiate a new contract, make sure they're not caught off guard, essentially. That's what was going on. Now I want to talk about Marcus Freeman, and I want to talk about Notre Dame. And man, that siren is annoying. That is so annoying. I can't even describe it. How much longer is this going to go on? And it's probably ruining some of the videos, but I also know Pate was in a studio once for his show, and they had construction work going on during his show. I imagine that was super annoying. Super, super annoying. So we'll power through it, but just curious as to how long that could last. Let me look at the radar here before we could continue, because if, for example, this were to continue for another 2 hours, I would be tempted to just end it. But it looks like right now we are almost in the clear. Like the green is about to pass over me. I'm about to enter the green, which is light rain, and the red is about to pass over me, which is the heaviest rain and the severe thunderstorms. So I think we're good. Thankfully, no tornadoes. Unlike a few weeks ago, I remember there was a tornado warning and there was a funnel cloud that touched down pretty close, or at least a funnel that developed. Anyway, I'm going to tell you why Marcus Freeman is doing a better job at Notre Dame than Brian Kelly could. Freeman is doing what Brian Kelly could not, and that is evident in last year's college football playoff run. Freeman is a rising coach who is young. He has 2 losses against Group of 5 teams, and yet he has 3 wins against college football playoff teams. He has 3 playoff wins, and they show grit, they show fight, they show physicality, and they're recruiting at a level that Kelly didn't before. I think that Marcus Freeman right now is he's a top 10 head coach, if not top 15. I think that the job he did last year after that NIU loss was very admirable. I got to tell you guys, and this is admitting where I was wrong here, I thought he was going to get fired at the end of the year, or at least at the end of 2026 after that NIU loss. I thought to myself, this is the game where we're going to look back on it and say, yep, that's why Marcus Freeman got fired. Now, I don't know if he'll be at Notre Dame for 10, 15, or 20 years. And maybe at some point he does get fired. I mean, losing games like that makes the leash shorter unless you make up for it by winning several playoff games, which Notre Dame did last year. However, I get the feeling that by looking at the teams he has produced, that the coaching is getting better every year and that the talent is getting better every year. Especially from 2022, his first year of 2023, you saw that huge jump. I think the 23 Notre Dame team and the 24 Notre Dame team were very, very similar. The difference is one of the 12-team playoff in a much easier schedule. The other had to play Ohio State, Duke, and Louisville 3 games in a row and at a road trip to Clemson. So I think that if the 2023 Notre Dame team played with the 2024 schedule, I think you would have had similar results. And that is a compliment, honestly. That means Notre Dame fielded 2 top 10, if not higher, top 8. Last year's team was certainly a top 6, top 5 team around there at the end of the year, and overshot that by reaching the national championship and having an opportunity to win it all and claim to be the best team last season. Freeman's done a good job. He's a great culture guy. He has gotten much better at in-game decision-making. I think that was evident in the college football playoff. And he made a great hire at OC with Mike Denbrock, who I think is one of the best in the business. And he was able to keep Al Golden at Notre Dame long enough to go on that run. I mean, his career record at Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman, is 33-10. 33-10. And he has a 3-1 record in the playoffs. And you look at Brian Kelly, and Kelly never had the 12-team playoff, so I don't want to be too unfair. But Kelly did not recruit at the same level. Kelly had years of 8-5, 8-5, 8-5, 9-4, 4-8, and then it was from 2015 on, with the exception of 2016, they won 10 or more games every year. So he did improve Notre Dame. Certainly, there's no question about it. He left Notre Dame in a much better position than Charlie Weiss did. That was a disastrous tenure. But Kelly had some ups and downs that even well into his tenure that I don't know if Marcus Freeman is going to have, and he certainly hasn't had yet. And Freeman, keep in mind, is young. He's only 39 years old. He's 39. He has easily 25 years of coaching left in him. If not 30, maybe even 35, with modern medicine advancing at the pace it is, and with the fact that he's a healthy, in shape, smart guy. And that stuff matters. That certainly matters. So I look at Brian Kelly at LSU, and I look at Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, and I think to myself, wow, Freeman and Notre Dame are going on this really upward trajectory here. And while I think they'll regress in 2025 from 2024, I love Notre Dame in 2026. Love them. LSU, meanwhile, I don't think Brian Kelly will be their head coach in 2 years. I don't. I think he'll be gone after 2026 for sure, if not after this season. Notre Dame made the right move, letting Kelly go, although honestly I don't know if they had the resources to keep Kelly there, because I think LSU does have more resources than Notre Dame. But Notre Dame made the right decision promoting Marcus Freeman. There was some criticism about it early, And then after the Marshall loss in 2022, and then again last year after the NIU loss, there was criticism as well. And again, he's had great coaching staffs, a lot of the same coaching staff that was at Cincinnati under Fickell, he has at Notre Dame. And those are some elite assistant coaches. And he's made good hires. Notre Dame is a good NIL fund. They have resources and they're recruiting well. So in a certain degree, he has built his program's floor to be higher than where it was under Kelly, so that even if he makes some mistakes and has some growing pains, and you'd hope most of those are over, and they probably are, but who knows, the floor is not as low as it was under Kelly. You're not going to have a 4-8 year under Marcus Freeman, I don't think. And let's just look at their records at Notre Dame, for example. Freeman, 33-10, and this is in 3 years. 3 years with a 3-1 CFP record. Kelly was 92-39 overall record and 0-2 in the CFP. Now again, Kelly played 2018 Clemson and 2020 Bama, who are some of the best teams of the 21st century. And I don't think last year's Notre Dame beats either of those teams. So on a surface level, this isn't an insane comparison that clearly Marcus Freeman is a better coach than Kelly. But what I will tell you is the fact that Marcus Freeman could suffer some bad losses against Marshall and against NIU. How could I forget that? To be honest, though, when you lose that game but still make the playoffs and you win out and show that that game was a fluke, it can be easily forgotten at times, unless you really hate Notre Dame, and I don't. But the fact that Freeman could rally the troops from those losses and compete with good teams and beat them, meanwhile, when Kelly had some bad games, it usually spelled that they were going to lose 5, 4, even 8 games in the season, I think speaks to the job that Freeman has done. I think Freeman's built one of the best programs in college football right now and moving forward. That's especially the case if they can hold on to their strength and conditioning coach, to Mike Denbrock, to Joe Rudolph, who I think is an elite offensive line coach. I'm very high on Freeman in the long term, especially. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, like the video. We need more Notre Dame fans here on College Football with Sam. So if you could follow along with us and go on a journey with us as we cover the 2025 season, that would be pretty incredible. Oh my gosh. Nose itches. Oh. Wow. Can't hear anything, Sam. Are you good? You can't? You couldn't hear anything? Oh, I think that was when I took my break to go to the bathroom. Or not go to the bathroom, but get some pills and water for my headache. Gosh. And this siren keeps going off. Are you kidding me? Come on. Come on. That's just absolutely ridiculous. Completely and utterly ridiculous. Oh, I think I'm going to have to get another water break, guys. I'm sorry. I'll be right back to get some more water, and we'll resume this show. Hey guys, so I'm exhausted. It doesn't look like the warning's gonna end anytime soon. My head is killing me. Oh, yeah. I know none of you guys can hear it, but man, it's hard to process that I can hear it very clearly, but you guys can't. Wow. Wow. Um I think what I'm going to do, because we're already an hour 40 in, and I don't want to get in the habit too much of going live for like 2.5 hours, and that's what we're going to do if I continue. I'm going to end this early. If you guys have any super chats, I'll stay on for those, but at this point, what I should probably do is wait until the siren's over, or maybe I'm not as tired to talk about the rest of the stuff, because I prefer higher quality, and on a day like today, my quality just isn't up to par, and the yeah, the weather doesn't help. If the siren wasn't going on, it would be one thing, but I mean, I can hear all the thunder, all the siren stuff. It's distracting, and you guys deserve, even if it means I end the live early, you deserve to hear me talk about Ryan Day with complete clarity and all my mental faculty being dedicated to Ryan Day, and not wondering if it's, a tornado warning or a severe thunderstorm warning, any of that stuff. So I'm going to get off, and I'll edit the title and cover so that way you guys, it's not like deceiving in any way. And you'll get a few of these videos. You'll get a few of these videos throughout the week. Ones that I recorded tonight, where if there's any interruptions, I'll just edit them out and release them as is. And then pay attention. Please hit the notification bell if you haven't already. Just hit that, and that way you'll get notified when we release videos, like throughout the week. I'm not kidding you. I'm at a point where, with what I've recorded today, I'm at a point where I kid you not, guys. I'm at a point where I can release 3 to 4 videos per day and take 2 days off of doing this. So that's very helpful. So 3 to 4 videos per day. Don't have to watch all of them. Last thing I'll ask before I get off, actually. So there's 17 of you on here. I want you guys, if you can, to type an answer in the chat to this question that I'm going to ask you. Would creating team-specific podcasts or playlists